A chance encounter with a hungry German shepherd changed everything for one woman living alone in rural America. What began as a simple act of kindness, offering food to a starving dog, led to an astonishing series of events that nobody could have anticipated. When the majestic dog returned the next day, what he brought with him wasn't just surprising, it was life-changing. This remarkable true story proves that sometimes the animals we help end up helping us in ways we never expected. Get ready for a heartwarming journey that will restore your faith in the powerful connection between humans and animals. Rebecca Mitchell stood on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. At 34, she had left a demanding career in Seattle to renovate her late grandmother's farmhouse in rural Montana. The transition from city life to this isolated property had been jarring, but after 2 months, she was finally adapting to the rhythm of country living. A sudden movement at the edge of her property startled her. A large German shepherd emerged from the tree line, his ribs visible beneath a dull coat. Despite his condition, the dog carried himself with dignity, amber eyes alert and intelligent as he cautiously approached. "Hey there," Rebecca called softly. The dog froze, studying her warily. He wore no collar, and a small scar marked his right ear. Rebecca stepped inside, returning with leftover chicken and a bowl of water. She placed them at the bottom of the porch steps before backing away. "It's okay," she encouraged. "You look hungry." The shepherd held his distance for several long minutes. Then hunger won out. He approached with deliberate caution, never taking his eyes off Rebecca as he drank the water and devoured the chicken in efficient bites. "Where did you come from, boy?" she wondered aloud. The dog licked his chops, gave her one final appraising look, then turned and trotted back toward the woods, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. That night, Rebecca filled a proper dog bowl with kibble and left it alongside fresh water on the porch. "Just in case," she murmured to herself. Something about the shepherd's intelligent gaze had touched her. She couldn't explain it, but she felt certain their paths had crossed for a reason. As she drifted off to sleep, Rebecca found herself thinking about the mysterious dog, wondering about his story. Had he been abandoned? Was he lost? Or was he truly wild, a creature of the forest who had somehow maintained the dignified bearing of his domesticated ancestors? Whatever his past, she hoped he might return. In this isolated place where neighbors were few and far between, even the brief connection with the shepherd had been a welcome shift in her solitary routine. Rebecca woke to insistent scratching at her front door. The clock read 6:17 a.m. For a moment she lay still, wondering if she'd imagined the sound. Then it came again. Scratch, scratch, followed by a low whine. Through her bedroom window, she glimpsed the German shepherd from the day before, standing on her porch. Curious, she threw on a robe and hurried downstairs. Through the sidelight window, she saw the dog had something in his mouth. The food bowl she'd left out was empty. "Well, good morning to you too," she said, cautiously opening the door. The shepherd backed up respectfully, then gently set down what he was carrying, a worn leather wallet. With expectant eyes, he nudged it toward her with his nose. Rebecca picked it up carefully. Mud caked the exterior, but the leather was good quality. Inside, she found several soggy dollar bills and a faded driver's license. The photo showed an elderly man. The issue date was from several years ago. The address listed was just 5 miles down the road. "Albert Henderson," she read aloud. "Where did you get this?" The dog's ears perked at her voice, but he offered no explanation, instead turning to look toward the driveway, then back at her. Rebecca studied the shepherd's intent gaze. "You want me to follow you?" His tail gave a single wag. "Wait here," she said, hurrying to get dressed. 5 minutes later, she re-emerged with the wallet, her phone, and car keys. The German shepherd barked once, a sound of apparent approval, then trotted toward her car and looked back expectantly. "You want to get in?" she asked, opening the passenger door. With surprising grace, the dog leapt into the seat, as if he'd done it many times before. "Okay then," Rebecca said, starting the engine. "Let's return this wallet." As they drove down the winding country road, Rebecca couldn't help marveling at the strangeness of the situation. Here she was, following the directions of a stray dog, carrying a muddy wallet to a stranger's house. If anyone had told her a week ago that this would be her Saturday morning, she would have laughed in disbelief. Yet somehow it felt right. The German shepherd sat beside her with an air of purposefulness, occasionally glancing at her as if to make sure she remained committed to their mission. "His behavior's so unlike what I'd expect from a wild animal," she murmured. "More like a working dog, a dog with a job." "You're quite the character, aren't you?" she said, reaching over to touch his head. The shepherd leaned slightly into her hand, the first real sign of trust he'd shown. 15 minutes later, they turned onto a gravel driveway, leading to a modest farmhouse. A weathered barn stood nearby, and an old pickup sat in the yard. The shepherd's posture shifted immediately, ears forward, body tense with recognition. As Rebecca parked, an elderly man emerged from the house, leaning heavily on a cane. His face registered shock as he spotted the German shepherd. "Ranger?" he called, voice trembling. "My God, is that you?" The dog whined, pawing at the window. Rebecca quickly opened the door, and the shepherd bounded out, rushing toward the old man, then stopping just short, sitting obediently at his feet while his tail swept the ground. "I can't believe it," the man whispered, kneeling carefully to stroke the dog's head. "Where have you been, old friend?" "I think he brought you this," Rebecca said, approaching with the wallet. "He showed up at my door with it this morning." Albert Henderson's eyes widened. "My wallet. I lost it 3 days ago while checking fence lines." He looked down at Ranger with amazement. "You found it, didn't you, boy? After all this time, you're still looking out for me." Rebecca's confusion must have shown because Albert gestured to the porch. "Please, come sit. Seems I owe you and Ranger both my thanks." They settled into worn wooden chairs while Ranger curled at Albert's feet, eyes darting between them protectively. "I don't understand," Rebecca said, watching the obvious connection between man and dog. "If he's yours, why was he at my place last night? I thought he was a stray." Albert's weathered hand trembled as it stroked Ranger's head. "He disappeared 4 months ago during a terrible storm. Lightning struck a tree near my fence line and brought it down. He bolted. Never done that before. I searched everywhere, put up flyers across the county. After weeks with no sign, I had to accept he might be gone for good." "He seemed to know exactly where I lived," Rebecca said. "Why wouldn't he have come home on his own?" Albert pointed toward the tree line, where Rebecca noticed fresh fence posts and newly disturbed earth. "Power company replaced all the poles after the storm, cleared nearly an acre of trees, changed everything, how it looks, how it smells. For a dog trying to find his way home, it might have felt like trying to return to a place you no longer recognize." Rebecca looked at Ranger, his head resting contentedly on Albert's knee. "Until he found your wallet," she said. Albert nodded, eyes misting. "Smart as they come. Always has been." "Ranger wasn't just a pet," Albert explained. His voice grew stronger as he shared their story. "He's my service dog. Came to me through a veterans program 5 years ago." Rebecca noticed for the first time that Albert's left leg ended just below the knee, a prosthetic visible above his boot. "Vietnam," he said, catching her glance. "Stepped on a mine in '71. Managed all right over the years, but balance became an issue. That's when they paired me with Ranger." The dog's ears perked at the sound of his name. "Police trained, originally. Washed out of their program. Too gentle, if you can believe it, but perfect for service work. He helps with balance, fetches my meds, even pulls the wheelchair when I need it." Rebecca's eyes widened. "That explains why he brought me your wallet, showed me where you lived. He was trained to help." "More than trained," Albert said, voice soft. "He understands. Always has." Ranger's tail thumped the porch. "How did he end up at my place?" Rebecca asked. Albert sighed. "After the storm, the power company cleared a path between our properties. Likely made a new route through the woods. You offered him something I couldn't these last months. Connection. Kindness." "I just gave him some food," Rebecca said. "Sometimes that's enough," Albert replied. "I was beginning to lose hope I'd ever see him again." His voice caught. Ranger whimpered softly and pressed his head closer to Albert's knee. "Thank you for bringing him home," Albert said, looking at her with deep gratitude. "Most folks would have just kept a dog this valuable," Rebecca smiled. "He knew where he belonged. I just provided the ride." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the rhythmic creak of Albert's rocker and Ranger's contented sighs. Rebecca found herself oddly reluctant to leave, drawn to this quiet moment of restoration. "Tell me about your place," Albert said after a while. "Not many new neighbors out this way." As Rebecca described her grandmother's property and her renovation plans, she realized this was the longest conversation she'd had since moving to Montana. In this unlikely connection, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: belonging. As afternoon approached, Rebecca rose to leave. Ranger followed Albert's every movement, clearly overjoyed to be home. "You're welcome to visit any time," Albert said, smiling. "Not many neighbors out this way, and even fewer who'd go out of their way to help an old man and his dog." "Marie," Albert said, a hint of defiance in his tone. "And I've made a new friend in the process." He introduced Rebecca, explaining how Ranger had orchestrated their meeting. Marie's professional demeanor softened as she listened to the story. "That's remarkable." She looked at her father with new eyes. "Maybe we've been too hasty about selling." "I've been telling you I can manage," Albert said, "especially with Ranger back." Marie sighed, setting her purse down. "Dad, it's not just about managing, it's about safety. What if you fall? What if something happens and no one's around?" "Ranger would get help," Albert insisted. "That's what he's trained to do." Rebecca hesitated, then spoke. "I might have a solution, if you're both open to it." Two pairs of eyes turned to her expectantly. "My grandmother's property has a caretaker's cottage about 100 yards from the main house. It's small, but self-contained. I've been planning to renovate it, but wasn't sure for what." Rebecca took a breath, surprised at her own spontaneity. "What if Albert moved there? He'd have his independence, but I'd be nearby if anything happened, and there's plenty of land for Ranger." Marie looked stunned. "You'd do that for a stranger?" Rebecca glanced at Ranger, who was watching the conversation with calm interest. "Let's just say I've learned to trust his judgment." Albert's weathered face broke into a broad smile. "See, Marie? I told you things would work out." Marie shook her head, but Rebecca could see the relief in her eyes. "We'd need to discuss details, of course. Rental terms, modifications for accessibility." "Of course," Rebecca agreed. "But the bones are good. It could work." As they talked through logistics, Rebecca marveled at the turn her day had taken. She'd awakened to a dog at her door, and now she was potentially gaining neighbors, perhaps even friends, all because she'd offered food to a hungry animal. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses yielded the most unexpected returns. Over the next month, Rebecca threw herself into renovating the caretaker's cottage. What had begun as a casual offer transformed into a purposeful project, giving her a focus she'd lacked since moving to Montana. Albert visited regularly to consult on accessibility features, always accompanied by Ranger. The German Shepherd seemed to have appointed himself project supervisor, inspecting each day's progress with solemn attention. "He approves of the wider doorways," Albert chuckled one afternoon, as Ranger walked deliberately through each entrance, tail wagging. "Always was particular about having enough space to maneuver beside me." Rebecca wiped paint from her hands. "He's quite the critic. Yesterday, he actually growled at the plumber when he tried to install the wrong kind of shower handle." "Smart dog," Albert nodded. "Knows I need the lever type, not those round knobs." These interactions had become the highlight of Rebecca's days. Having spent years in corporate environments where relationships were transactional and guarded, she found Albert's straightforward friendship refreshing, and Ranger's loyal presence added a warmth she hadn't realized she'd been missing. By early July, the cottage was ready. Marie helped coordinate the move, her initial skepticism gradually replaced by genuine appreciation for the arrangement. "I haven't seen Dad this animated in years," she confided to Rebecca, as they watched Albert direct the placement of his favorite recliner. "It's like having Ranger back has given him a new lease on life." "I think they saved each other," Rebecca replied, watching man and dog move in synchronized harmony around the cottage. "And honestly, they've helped me too. This place was starting to feel too empty." The cottage's location offered Albert independence while providing the security of having Rebecca nearby. A dedicated path between the properties made visits easy, and a system of simple alert buttons throughout the cottage connected directly to Rebecca's phone in case of emergency. On the evening after Albert officially moved in, Rebecca invited him and Marie for dinner at the main house. As they sat on the porch afterward, watching fireflies rise from the meadow, Albert raised his glass in a toast. "To Ranger," he said, glancing down at the shepherd resting contentedly at his feet. "The best matchmaker a man could ask for." They laughed, but Rebecca felt the truth in his words. Without Ranger's intervention, his deliberate bringing of the wallet, his guidance to Albert's home, none of them would be sitting here together. "You know what still puzzles me?" Marie said, refilling her glass. "How did Ranger know to bring Dad's wallet to you specifically? There are other houses closer to Dad's property." Rebecca had wondered the same. "Maybe he tried other homes first." Albert shook his head. "Or maybe he recognized something in you, someone who needed connection as much as I did." The thought lingered as darkness fell, and the stars emerged in brilliant clarity above the Montana landscape. Rebecca realized she felt settled for the first time since arriving, rooted in a way that had nothing to do with property ownership and everything to do with connection. All because she'd offered kindness to a hungry dog on her porch. 6 months after Ranger's remarkable return, the landscape had transformed. Autumn painted the Montana hills in gold and crimson, mirroring the changes in the lives he'd touched. Rebecca's grandmother's house now truly felt like home. The renovation was complete, but more importantly, it had become a center of community. Weekend dinners with Albert, and occasionally Marie, had become tradition. Neighbors, initially curious about the newcomer, now stopped by regularly, often bringing homemade preserves or fresh game in exchange for Rebecca's city-honed skills in tech support or tax preparation. Albert had flourished in the caretaker's cottage, with Ranger at his side and Rebecca nearby. His independence had expanded rather than diminished. He'd even started volunteering at the local Veterans Center, bringing Ranger along to demonstrate service dog capabilities to other vets who might benefit from such companionship. On this particular Sunday morning, Rebecca sat on her porch with a steaming mug of coffee, watching Albert and Ranger walk the perimeter of the property, their daily constitutional, regardless of weather. Ranger still maintained his protective stance beside Albert, but his once dull coat now gleamed with health, his vigilant eyes bright and engaged. The sound of tires on gravel announced Marie's arrival. She joined Rebecca on the porch, accepting the offered coffee with a grateful nod. "Dad looks 10 years younger," she observed, watching her father navigate the gentle slope with Ranger's steady presence beside him. Rebecca smiled. "They both do." "I brought something I thought you might like to see," Marie said, pulling an envelope from her purse. Inside was a faded photograph of a much younger Albert in uniform, kneeling beside a German shepherd with the same distinctive white chest marking as Ranger. "That's Rex, Dad's patrol dog in Vietnam," Marie explained, "the one he always talked about but never fully got over losing. When the service dog program matched him with Ranger, he couldn't believe the resemblance, said it was like getting a piece of his past back." Rebecca studied the photograph, noting the same intelligent eyes, the same protective posture. "The marking is identical," she murmured. Marie nodded. "Dad says some things can't be explained, just accepted. He believes Rex somehow had a hand in bringing Ranger to him." Though Rebecca had always considered herself practical, the past months had opened her to life's mysteries. Some connections defied logical explanation. Albert and Ranger completed their circuit and approached the porch, both moving with the comfortable rhythm of beings attuned to each other's needs. "Beautiful morning," Albert called out. Rebecca made room as they joined the gathering. Ranger settled at Albert's feet, but kept his head up, ever watchful, ever present. "Marie was just showing me the photo of Rex," Rebecca said. Albert nodded, his eyes distant with memory. Some bonds transcend time. I believe that now more than ever. The four of them sat in comfortable silence, a family forged through unexpected circumstances. Rebecca thought about the chain of events that had brought them together: a storm, a lost dog, a wallet, an act of kindness, each link essential, yet none sufficient alone. Ranger suddenly lifted his head, alert to movement at the edge of the property. A young German shepherd, thin but dignified, emerged hesitantly from the tree line. "Well, I'll be," Albert whispered. Ranger stood, looking to Albert as if seeking permission. At Albert's nod, he trotted toward the newcomer, not threatening, but welcoming. Rebecca felt a sense of completion as she watched the two dogs meet, then turned together toward the porch. The circle was expanding. The chain of kindness was extending. Another hungry visitor, another chance to offer compassion, another beginning. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who loves inspiring stories, and help us spread messages of courage and hope.